Hello, everyone. We'll do a 30-second countdown, make sure everyone's in the room. Go on, Benedict. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We're in the afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to this session with Google Digital Garage today. Keep your family safe online. My name is Kirsty, and I'm a trainer for this free skills training program, Google Digital Garage. I've been working in the digital marketing industry now for around 6 years, and I absolutely love working with individuals and small businesses to help them get online. But this is a little bit different today. We're starting to move into creating this safe space online for your family and some of the things that you can use in order to do that. But I'm not up here alone. In the chat, you will see our lovely moderator, Benedict. Benedict is going to be there throughout the whole of today's session. He's going to be sharing some really useful links with you. He's going to be answering any questions that come through. So please do head to the chat, say hello, introduce yourself. And while you do, I am going to run through a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, if you do have any trouble hearing or seeing this webinar, try refreshing the browser. Sometimes we get a little bit of a delay in the YouTube system, and when you refresh it, seems to fix all our problems. So try that as a first point of call. If you are looking for where to say hello in that chat, usually that instant chat will sit to the right hand side of this video. If you can't see it on the right hand side, you may need to make sure that you are signed into your YouTube account. If you're on a mobile device, then potentially the chat is located below the video and you need to scroll down. I will be pausing throughout the session to take any questions that come through in that chat. But also remember, we're both here for the whole way through. So Benedict's going to be there the whole time, and then I'll pick up any questions in those pausing for questions for anything that's a little bit more complex, or we feel that there's a lot of questions in that arena. So finally, remember, this is not a standalone session. This session is part of that whole Google Digital Garage schedule, so you can head to the link that Benedict's going to share for you in the chat, check out our upcoming schedule, check out all the sessions that are happening, and see if there's something that you can be a part of. Wonderful. I think that's all the updating, everything that needs to be talked about in that area. So without further ado, you can see on the left-hand side, at the bottom left of this screen, we have our partners for today's session, internetmatters.org. And I'd love to introduce them because they're a massive part of the building of this particular Keep Your Family Safe Online. And we really want to start thinking about how we can understand the risks that our young people are facing online, and how as parents, as guardians, as teachers, as adults, we can start to proactively deal with some of these challenges that we're facing. Now, in partnership with Internet Matters really care about focusing and creating guidance that helps adults, parents, guardians start to progress through some of the issues that we can experience when using the internet. And partner Internet Matters expertise and focus in this area, and with Google's deep understanding of the tech side, you can create this amazing delivery that starts to understand the challenges and how we can mitigate it with some solutions. Now, Internet Matters is a non-for-profit, and it has a simple purpose. It wants to empower parents or carers to keep children safe in the digital world. So what we're going to talk about today is thinking about web safety, what that means for you and your family or the young people that you are connected to. so that you can feel really confident about your family being online while still staying safe and secure. So, this session is aimed at anybody who is interested in keeping the children that they care for safe. So, if I do say parents at any point through this presentation, I mean all carers, not just parents, but grandparents, aunties, uncles, guardians, teachers, anybody that is an adult that feels that they need support or guidance with the young people in their life. So if you do hear me say parents, I mean everyone. I'm going to break this session up into 3 clear sections. First of all, we're going to concentrate on understanding online safety, thinking about the power of the internet and some of the key areas of concerns that our adults have. Part 2, we're going to think about actually now, how do we keep our children safe? And there's some specific risks that our children are facing. So we're going to introduce some of those tools that we can use as adults to proactively combat some of these risks. And then finally, we're going to boost our attitudes towards safety. I want to start talking about online safety and how we can approach those conversations with our children. So starting to think about understanding online safety, thinking about that safety landscape online and starting to think about some of those key concerns that we all have when we start exploring this online world with our children. And it's really interesting because modern kids today, they can't necessarily even think of a time. They have never known a time where the entire world was not connected through the internet. And actually, this age group are spending more time online than anyone else, certainly more than us, so it's really, really interesting when we start to think about our concerns as adults. So in the chat, I would love for you to write down some of the biggest concerns that you face in keeping your children safe online. And I've got some examples on the next slide, but I would love to hear from you in the chat. Is there anything particular that's brought you here today that you feel really is a bit of a barrier, is a bit of a concern when it comes to your family spending time online? It's really, really interesting to get these answers. Now, I will come back to the chat and have a look at some of yours. Now, Internet Matters asked this question to a case study, and they got such a wide range of answers. And some of them, those of you watching today might look at and think, oh, absolutely, that really resonates with me. That really resonates with what I face as a carer. So these are real quotes from a focus group of Internet Matters of parents and carers alike that start to demonstrate some of these real specific issues that people are facing. And some of you might look at these and think, yeah, I feel that too. You're not alone. Many parents, many carers, anybody in that position have those same worries and concerns, and they're looking for help. So let's read some of them. Parents need to be more involved, engaged, and educated. My children are more tech savvy than I am. Safety is paramount. I'm concerned with what they get up to when I'm not monitoring them. This is the era of technology. Kids don't play outside anymore. The amount of times I've heard that sentence. People can pretend to be anyone online. Again, a real common concern. I don't want them stumbling across things that they shouldn't be stumbling across. So starting to think about the things that you connect with some of these real quotes. And I can see in the chat there, my daughter is 6 and I want to educate her before she's older. Absolutely. Really great comment, because it's really about thinking, okay, so these are our concerns. Let's have a look at some of these statistics. And now how can we open that conversation and use some of the tools to make sure that as our children get older, they feel safe. They feel like they can talk about some of these issues and these challenges that they come across. Now, these concerns, you might be looking at them and thinking, yes, I really connect to that. I really connect to what that's saying. I really think that there's something that I would like some tips around this. Now, it's really interesting because some parents might approach some of these concerns by restricting or limiting internet access from their own fear. And potentially, that's not necessarily the best approach, because what could happen is we see those little rebellious streaks as they get older, and our children will find a way to be online. They'll find a way to access these places. So it's really, really interesting. So some stats. Be online is a part of everyday life. It's really interesting for us as adults. Ask yourself how old you were when you got hold of the kind of technology, and just because we've had that comment there, the type of technology your 6-year-old has access to now. Think about how old you were when you got access to that type of tech. Think about it. I mean, I didn't get my first phone until I must have been about 16, because my parents were adamant that I didn't need a phone in secondary school. And all my friends had phones. Really, and I mean, they weren't like they are today. They were bricks. You remember the indestructible with the snake on it? Yeah. So it's really interesting. But 81% of 12 to 15-year-olds use a smartphone to go online. 81%. 67% of 8 to 11-year-olds play games online. And 73% of 5 to 7-year-olds use a tablet to go online. There's a study by a doctor, Dr. Linda Papadopoulos, and she talks a lot about parents experiencing a lot of things before their kids have, and they rely on that history to teach their children. But tech is an area of our lives where those usual rules just don't apply, because as a parent, you potentially didn't have a tablet at 5 years old. So that thought of keeping your child safe is a real new concept, because it's not something that you've gone through and experienced as a child yourself. So it's this new fast-paced element of our lives that we have to kind of really start to connect with. And things move very quickly in this connected world. You know, there's a tendency to limit the access to tech, but let's remind ourselves, you know, tech can actually be an amazing force for good. It can be a great force for so many positive things. Access to a wealth of information for learning, for homework. There's loads of interactive tools, games that we can use to really aid our education and our learning, some of which we can do together with our children. And there's also this freedom of expression, this ability to find good role models and find a voice, and start to find these kind of inspirational characters that we might not reach without the internet. But even with this amazing force for good, and understanding that there can be these great outcomes using tech in controlled ways with our children, the internet does remain a complex place. And it's not actually, you know, the internet, the web as a construct was not intentionally built for children. It's not regulated like other children's services are. And as adults, tech is an enabler, absolutely. But also with so much power comes so much responsibility. And as parents, that means a better understanding of how we're using it with the children in our lives. So again, I want you to take some time in the chat and tell me, what do your children actually do online? So tell us in the chat, what do you think they're actually doing online? Are they downloading things? Are they chatting to friends? Depending on their age, they might be playing games. They might be watching YouTube videos. What are they actually doing online? Because it's super clear that our children are growing up in a very, very different world to my generation, certainly, but my parents' generation, and so on and so on and so on. Now, a lot of you that are watching today are going to have a real firm grip on exactly what your children are doing online and exactly kind of what timings they're spending online and um, how they're really engaging and interacting and sort of making sure that they're using those devices in a great way. So when we start to think about what our children are doing online, how they're using the internet, it's clear they're in a very different world to us. The average daily screen time is around 3 hours and 15 minutes a day. It's a lot of time, right? This digital technology has become a fundamental part of our children's lives. 26 times per day is how often the average child between the ages of 11 and 16 post on social media. That's a lot, right? 62% of children aged 11 and 12 have a social media profile, even though the minimum age for a social media profile is 13. And a third of children play online against people that they have never met in person, i.e. Fortnite. I'm really interested seeing some of those comments come through in the chat. Watching YouTube mainly, of course, if they're 6, there's loads of things on YouTube, isn't there? Playing Roblox, thanks Laura. Yeah, Roblox, again, gaming, right? Not sure how young the children you've got in your care are, Laura, but so interesting. Netflix, Disney Plus, watching YouTube again. Yeah, really interesting. So it's absolutely imperative that we start to think about, okay, what are they doing online? And how can we guide them through as they start to explore the internet? How can we start to guide them through some of these common areas that potentially could be a challenge for us to approach together when they're browsing online? Now that brings me to my first pausing for questions, and we're going to jump in next to those core challenges and start discussing actually how we can keep our children safe versus some of these specific and kind of popular concerns that we have as parents. But do we have any questions at this point? If not, please remember that Benedict is in the chat, ready and waiting. So pop them in and he'll either answer you there and then in the chat, but we also have 2 more pausing for questions before we finish today. Which brings us to part 2. Okay, so how do we actually keep our children safe online? We want to define the risks, assess what our concerns are, and then make sure that we've got practical but useful steps and tools that we can put in place as the carers, as the adults. So some of the key risks that we will come across. And I'm going to go into each of these individually. I'm going to provide you some context. I'm going to give you some tools that you can use. And after today, it might be something that you want to go and put into practice. But most importantly, and I think this is super important, is that I want to give you that confidence to get the conversation started with your children. It's so important to be able to open that open conversation where we can, even when our kids are young, speak to them and have that safety. A lot of these things happen where children don't feel, oh, if I tell mum or dad or I tell auntie or grandparents, whatever it is, then I'm going to get in trouble. And it's about sometimes building that open conversation where they can say, this has happened online, what do I do? And as the carers, we can provide that calm, open conversation where they know they're not in trouble, but we can still make sure that they understand what is right or wrong in this online world. So I'm going to walk through these 6 areas, starting with screen time wellness. So starting to think about the risks that we have with screen time. Screen time can offer our children, like we talked about before, opportunities to learn new skills, to at a touch of a button be able to access something that we would never find in our day-to-day lives. Fantastic. We're all aware of the pros and the cons, I'm sure all of us, in terms of engaging with screen time. Some of the biggest concerns that we have: too much screen time can impact our sleep. Sleep cycles are affected by that blue light that we get from screens. That blue light tricks our brain into thinking that it's still daylight, and it can make it difficult to sleep. So screens before bed, even as an adult, is a bit of a no-no. It can impact our behavior. We're creatures of habit. Humans are creatures of habit, and it doesn't take long to get used to just glancing. And if you translate this to being an adult, how many of you use your phone to check the time? Just looking at it, making the screen light up. It doesn't take long for us to develop some of those habits. But it can also, when we're young, affect that brain development. There can be that impact on our brain development. Screen-based entertainment increases this central nervous system arousal, and actually has been demonstrated to actually amplify anxiety. Now, it's really interesting that fact that 50% of primary school aged pupils take an internet enabled device to bed with them. So think about how that potentially could impact some of these three core areas. Now, a study with Columbia University, and I always think this is really interesting because I'm a millennial, and millennials are now more forgetful than OAPs because we've outsourced our memory to places like Google, GPS, calendar alerts. And I am a massive about this, because if I think about how I use my daily calendar in compared to even my parents who are not OAPs at all, and I start to think, actually my dad, he knows exactly what he's doing and where, because he's not living off a calendar in the same way I would. So it's really, really interesting when you start to actually look at the impact of outsourcing. And there's some positives. I mean, I've read a lot of articles around this topic. It does free up other parts of your brain to get creative elsewhere. It's not just negative, but it's really, really interesting because I know I can find information as a millennial. And if you think of the generations below myself, I know that I can find the information I need easily online. I can store it on my computer. I don't need to create a memory from it. Therefore, psychologically, I'm less likely to form a memory around some of the same things that my parents or my grandparents might. So it's really, really interesting. So we understand some of the issues around screen time, the sleep, the behavior, and the development of our brain as a young person, but how can we deal with this? Now, it's really, really interesting. Lockdown had a huge impact on our screen time, and we're still seeing the effects of it. I've seen a lot of videos recently. There's a trend on TikTok at the moment, isn't there? It's like honouring 3 years since the first lockdown. And for a lot of families, it naturally led to higher screen time. Our school, our socialization, connecting with family or friends was through these online devices. And it had a massive impact on this sort of screen time balance. Now, it's really important that we understand as adults that not all screen time is equal. Okay, and this really was difficult actually for me when I was starting to kind of set this out and get this clear, because something like homework, researching, FaceTiming a tutor or whatever it is not the same as going on something creative, looking at YouTube videos, learning a new skill. So not all screen time is equal. It's still important that we get that healthy balance where is possible. It's still important that we have that safety. It's still important that we find what works within our own households. And that's going to be different for every single one of you watching. There's going to be different patterns that work. One of my friends, there's absolutely no devices in the bedrooms, which is something I really like. I like the fact that there's a docking station on the landing, and that is it. Those phones live there before bed, and it's just how it is. And the children are great. The kids are great. They know that's the rule, and that's it. The habit is there. So it's really interesting. So what we want to do is create what we call this balanced digital diet. And that balance is going to look different depending on how you use your screens. Now, there's a couple of tools that you can use here, and some of them are, one of my absolute favorite tools is coming up next. But the first tool is Google's Family Link tool, and this can really help you start to balance that screen time. You can set a bedtime. So what you can do is you can connect your Family Link to your child's device. You can set alarms, you can set locks, temporary locks at different times of the day. So for example, at bedtime, you can set a bedtime routine where that device locks while they're asleep or while they should be asleep, so they can't access that device. You can also set homework or dinner time. So again, they lock at a certain time of day so they can focus on what it is they're doing that's not part of their screen time. And you can also set screen time limits. Now, again, depending on how old your child is, this is potentially something you can talk about. How long do you think is a good time to be spending on YouTube, on social media? Depending on how old your child is, you might be in a position where your child's still quite young and you're going to decide the right amount of screen time for your child, depending on what it is they're watching, playing, learning. And then you can use the Family Link app. There's an activity report that will show you exactly which apps your child is using the most on that device. So it's a great tool that you can start to implement and start to think about, okay, what do we think works for us? If you come onto Family Link and you can see that your, I don't know how old, but your 8-year-old is spending 9 hours on a weekend on YouTube. Do you think that's, is there something else that you can be doing on the weekend around school? It's interesting. So that's Google's Family Link, which is a really great tool. But then there's also a tool called Forest app. Now, this is one of my favorite apps. I actually use this when I need some focus time. So Forest app, you have a free version and you also have a paid version. I think it's like £2 one-off payment, and that buys the full version of it. So they're a charity. Now what it allows you to do is set a timer, like what you can see on the screen here, where you set the time that you would like to lock your device for. Now, with the free version, you lock the whole device. With the paid version, you can lock certain apps. You can say, I want to lock my whole device, but I want to be able to access my emails and whatever, my calendar. So you can choose things that you might still need to use within that period of time. The tree will grow depending on the length of time that you've set. So you can see we've got 59 seconds left of this hour, or 59 minutes left of this hour. So that whole tree will grow. However, if I open my device while this timer is running, I kill my tree. So I have a friend with 2 young kids who uses this for kind of getting ready for bed in the evening. They set their 20-minute timer and they'll see who can grow the most trees throughout the week. And then they have all sorts of like kind of competitions. And it's kind of like a real nice way of setting these non-screen time intervals, but kind of gamifying it. Really nice way of finding a focus off a screen. Now it's compatible with iPhones, but also Android as well. There's also another one called Hour Pact, which you can use as well, but it's not as fun as growing a tree. Now, what's also amazing is with Forest app, you collect in-app coins, and when you hit a certain amount of coins, you can then buy and purchase and choose to plant a real tree in the world through the charity that run Forest app. So it's a really nice tool that you can start to think about, how can I gamify some of this non-screen time with my family? And you can all have it on all of your devices. How can you change that approach into having non-screen time? So top tips to managing screen time: be the role model. Whatever behavior you would like your child to be mirroring, remember, they learn from us. So if I'm sat there, if I sit down for my lunch at the table and I'm on my phone, that's what my child is going to see as normal. And if I don't want my child to be doing that as their screen time, then I need to role model the behavior that I want them to have. So get involved with things like Forest app, and get involved with things like putting my phone in the hallway for bedtime, so that they're seeing those good best practices with those devices. Encouraging alternative activities. It could be, doesn't have to be paid for, it could be simple as picking up a magazine, picking up a book. It doesn't have to necessarily be going out and doing a paid for activity. But again, unplug and play, get the whole family involved, do some communal activities, get some cards, some board games on the go. I love a good board game. And agree on that access time, especially if you've got older children. I think it could be more difficult restricting as our children get older. But again, have that conversation even when they're young. How long do you think is the appropriate length of time that they can use their device? And encourage that critical thinking from themselves. If you spent this many hours, then it's bedtime, then it's this. What would you like to do in this time? And if they say, oh, I want to play on YouTube, have that conversation. Okay, so how are we going to separate that time then? What do you think is long enough for that restriction? So managing it is important, but it's not always about the screen time itself. It's about thinking about the type of activities that our children are using that screen time for on a consistent basis. More experts suggest that we should focus more on what the children are doing online and less about how long they're online. And I can see a question that's come through in terms of what is a healthy amount of screen time, especially if it's a school day versus the weekend. My daughter wants to watch TV or YouTube videos at the moment because she's 6. So think about it. It's less about how much time is good, how much time is bad, because that's going to look different depending on you as a family. It's more about what are they doing. So if someone is using, for example, I have a Kindle, right? That's screen time, but I might be reading. So if you have a child that's reading on their screen time, or they're watching YouTube videos where they are learning something, so rather than watching the same old cartoons, and we all know them when we have 6-year-olds around the house, right? We know the theme tunes, we sing the theme tunes, we know the characters' names. But it's rather than having an hour of them watching something that's not that enriching, could we watch something that's more learning based, and then finish with the favorite cartoon? How can we do to manage actually what we're doing, rather than restricting all the time and thinking about how long? And again, using some of these top tips to manage that time. So I hope that helps, that question that came through in the chat there. So the next thing that we struggle with, sometimes our child might stumble across what we would consider as inappropriate content. And sometimes our children can stumble upon unsuitable things, unsuitable sites, videos, completely by accident. Now, this doesn't need to be of a particular type of content. There's loads of different types of content that we can class as inappropriate, and that can be through games, that can be through things that they've accidentally downloaded, that can be through YouTube itself. So there's loads of different types of content that our children might come across, and some of this might be pornographic material, but also things like sites that are encouraging racism, crime, eating disorders, even suicide, unfortunately. Images that could be violent, or animal cruelty is a massive one at the moment that our children might stumble across as inappropriate. It might have swearing. The content might have swearing. Or it could be something like gambling websites or games that have chat rooms that are not moderated. Now, it can be really difficult as a parent, as a guardian, to monitor what our child is viewing at all times, right? Because they can access this material through any internet-enabled device. So as our children get older, we are not monitoring this if they're on their friend's phone, on the schoolyard, or children find ways. And that curiosity that we have as a child, it's delicate to manage that. And it really is. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, what's right, what's wrong, how do we do this? And there's different types of inappropriate content, and their exposure and the reaction to that inappropriate content is also going to depend on our individual children's age, but also maturity level. Because there's some children that might see something, know it's wrong, turn it off, and think, Mum, I saw this, I've turned it off, this is how I found it. But there's some children that might find it really funny and go on it again and show it to other children. So it can be really difficult. But there's a couple of programs that we can use that are starting to raise awareness of some of these situations. Some of the top tips when it comes to protecting our children's curiosity. First one, start a conversation. We talk about having a family agreement, which I find works really, really well. It's a great place to start because you can start your conversation about having certain boundaries, and you can also start to give your child these strategies on how to cope with anything they see by accident that might be upsetting. So i.e. they could turn off the tablet immediately and come and find an adult. So we can start to give them start this conversation where our child is immediately equipped with, if they see something that is upsetting, they can turn it off and come and find an adult. So we need to start that conversation. As soon as our child starts to use the internet, we can start talking about what they might find there regularly. You might find something that you don't like, or you might find upsetting, or you don't understand, and that's okay. Come and talk to me about it. If you come across something that you don't want to see, this button, you can always press that button and turn the screen off, and then come and find me and we can fix it, and you can talk about it, and we can make sure that you're okay. So again, sometimes it's just about that fear as children, and we've all been there, and it gets worse as we're teenagers, right? So it's sometimes about just opening up that conversation of, if you see something that upsets you, you can tell me. It's okay, we can talk about it. The next thing to think about is teaching them that think before they click. So helping our child understand that clicking on anything that pops up or is kind of on the side, like an advert, or if they're at an age where they're using things like email addresses, anything that might look too good to be true. Again, starting to have those conversations, ignoring clicking on those pop-ups. Or you could go as far as to actually block pop-ups, depending on what you're using as a device, like making sure those elements are not going to happen. But we all get, the ads on YouTube and all different things that potentially they might click through onto. And of course, the final top tip, and most of us are doing this, supervise if we can. And this is more ideal for younger children, which is why we say if you can, because those of you with kind of young teenagers, it's a little bit more difficult, isn't it? But again, there's body language that we can see even in a teenager when they're looking at something online that's potentially kind of upset them or isn't something that they should be looking at. We can start to see some of their changes in body language. If we can, we want to be in the same room as them. Even things like if you've got a setup where if they're sat at a table doing something, you can sort of see the screen, they've got their back to you, and you've got that clear sort of visual on that screen, so you can sort of observe what that child is looking at. And again, if you catch your child being what we call a digital leader, praise them. If they're older kids and you're someone here with teenagers, again, by starting a conversation and having that kind of family agreement, you're also giving that mutual respect and sort of, as a teenager, all we want is our privacy. Take yourself back to being a teenager. We just want our privacy. So again, depending on the age of your child, this family conversation, this family agreement is going to look a little bit different. So remember, the internet is a complex place, and it's not built intentionally for children, and it's not as regulated as other children's services might be. So there's a couple of things that you can do to make sure that you are mitigating to the best of your abilities your child stumbling across inappropriate content. The first step, the device itself, whether it's iPhone, whether it's Android, will have the ability to use the kind of age restrictions, the parental control restrictions and functions on the device itself. So if you've bought a new device, or you're introducing a new device, or even a device you're currently using, you've never looked at this, have a look in the settings. And if you don't know your way around it, Google to see if you can find the manual for that particular device that you've got, and have a look at how you can install parental controls. Now, loads of smartphones and the smartphone manufacturers have online step-by-step guides on how you can use things like screen time functions, parental control functionality, where you can set up, don't allow my child to download apps with these particular words in them, or this age limit on them. I set up overall screen time for individual apps that are on the device. So all the devices, you should be able to start to leverage some of these parental control functions that sit on the device itself. But we also have features that will be available to us through various broadband providers. So depending on who you're with, there are parental controls that you can activate at different levels for different devices as well. So all the different devices that are connected via your broadband provider at home. So you can either choose specific devices to have certain controls on them. You can put it total control on the whole house, or you can have time limits. So you can have the parental controls on between certain times. So if there's a particular time your child is watching YouTube, you can set certain filters up to sort of mitigate some of the risks of them seeing that inappropriate content they might come across. So there's a few different ideas that you can start to think about when it comes to how you can use that. Now, there's also something you can use called Google Safe Search. Now, this is a way that you can block any explicit images, videos, or websites from Google Search itself. So when Safe Search is off, Google will provide just the most relevant results to the search itself, which might have explicit content in it. But if you turn on the Safe Search filter, it will only give non-explicit content when those searches have been entered into the search engine. So there's a few different tools that you can use there. And it's a small selection that you can start to use and consider what's going to be best for you and your setup. YouTube is always something that's mentioned when it comes to what our kids are doing online. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of YouTube for Kids. Now, it is a separate app and it's got specialized video app content that's tailored towards children. So it's specifically curated content. It has full parental controls in the YouTube for Kids app. It also has filtering. So the YouTube for Kids is the first Google product that's built from the ground up with kids, with families in mind, and it offers a more contained YouTube experience for our children. Now, the content is still generated by YouTube creators, but it's using the power of Google systems to filter out content that might not be appropriate for our children and our kids. And we've got a few extra features there. So it's parent approved content. We can set those time limits on those profiles, and you can see on the left hand side screenshot we've got the 2 profiles there within the YouTube for Kids app. And you can also start to block or flag content that you don't think is necessarily appropriate. And we can also review our watch history, so we can see what our kids have been watching. So for more information, because this is a massive topic when it comes to inappropriate content, think about checking your child's smartphone settings. Definitely start here. Any device that's connected to the internet, have a look, see if there's any settings that you can set up those parental controls on. Use the parental controls on your broadband package. Talk to them. No filter is ever going to be fully effective, but it's definitely worth setting it up as a way of mitigating some of those risks. Safe search settings and family-friendly filters on websites. So again, remember that safe search for Chrome or any browser that you're using. Talk to other parents, see what other parents are doing. Now, there is a link that Benedict's going to share called internetmatters.org/parental-controls. So it's a really nice way that you can find out a little bit more information on setting up some of these parental controls. Great. So that's starting to think about inappropriate content. Some of the other risks, cyberbullying. Now, we know bullying happens no matter what age you are. And, you watching today with kids at home and in your care, bullying has always existed and will unfortunately continue to exist. As someone that suffered a lot in school when it came to bullying. But the internet and social media have changed the way that our children are experiencing bullying. Face-to-face bullying, smaller audience, it's within a particular world, it's limited to the group that can see what's happening, and the bully can be identified, or the bullies can be identified. It's easier to prove this happened, this is where it happened, and they're reprimanded for those actions. But cyberbullying is a whole new ball game. We're reaching a vast audience in a matter of seconds. Hurtful comments and images can be shared multiple times, again and again and again. It does offer that degree of anonymity to whoever the perpetrator is. It kind of gives them that protection. And it's difficult to police. It's difficult to punish or police and see who's doing what. So those of us that experience this face-to-face bullying, one of the biggest differences between that face-to-face bullying and cyberbullying is that it can be really hard to get away from. And young people can be bullied anywhere. It's not like going to school, having a bully at school, and going home and be able to relax. I could log onto my phone as a child at home and that bullying could continue. So there's a couple of things for us to look out for when it comes to adults. 1 in 8 12 to 15-year-olds say they've been bullied on social media. 1 in 8, I mean, that's a massive amount of children. And the fact is that the more time children spend online, the more chance they've got of having a negative experience at some point, because about half of all cyberbullying comes from someone who knows the victim. So it's still the same people as we've experienced, but not necessarily within the same time frame. So what do we want to have a look for? Well, has our child stopped using these electronic devices, or has it been really suddenly or unexpectedly don't want to use that particular device anymore? Maybe they seem nervous or jumpy when they're on their device, or they're obsessive about looking at that device. Or maybe they're reluctant to go to school or take part in activities that usually they're really engaged with. So there's different types of bullying that can happen within cyberbullying, and you'll hear different phrases, different words used in the context of cyberbullying. So it really helps for us to understand. So we've got harassment. This is where an individual is targeted with persistent or offensive messages. Sometimes you'll hear cyber stalking kind of used with harassment. We've got outing. So the word outing, you outed me, is where publicly something personal or private or embarrassing is shared, photos or images about someone. Trolling. So trolling is deliberately posting provocative and insulting messages about something sensitive, or inflicting things like racism, misogyny to a particular individual. Catfishing. This is where we steal someone's profile, or we take up a fake profile and we lure people into starting some kind of relationship. Roasting. This is where cyberbullies gang up on a particular individual and they send this offensive abuse until the victim is seen to crack. And the language behind it, again, crack. And then we've got griefing. So this is where we abuse or anger people, and it's usually used within gaming. So griefing is kind of a gaming term. Now, if your child is affected by cyberbullying, there's loads of places to go for help, and there's loads of places that you can find out more information. But to leave you on this topic, because again, it's a massive topic, there's a couple of do's and don'ts. Do find out why. Try and establish the facts around the incident, and keep an open mind. Talk it through. There's a blurred line between uploading and sharing content because it's funny, it'll get lots of likes, versus the potential of causing offence or hurt to a particular individual. Teach by example. So again, we want to model that positive behaviour in our child. We want to praise them when they take that on board and they do the positive behaviour. Learn from it. Above all, we want to help our child learn from what's happened, and we want to think about how we can do things differently all together. Again, coming back to opening that conversation with other carers and parents in our immediate environment. Don't get upset. We want to stay calm. And that's one of the hardest things when we see our child in pain and we see this cyberbullying happening, but we want to stay calm. We don't want to get upset, because we want that child again to be able to talk with other adults when these things come up. We don't want to ignore it. We want to take the situation seriously. We don't need to just blame someone else. We don't condone it. And this is here because if your child is the one that is cyberbullying, which can happen, maybe they're cyberbullying in retaliation to being cyberbullied. We want to make sure that they know that two wrongs don't make a right, because we don't want to encourage that bullying behaviour. And the really hard part for us as parents, we don't want to take away their devices, because this potentially could make the situation worse. It could encourage them to go behind our backs and find another way of checking in and getting online. So positively opening that conversation and just making ourselves aware that nobody likes to think that our own child could be a cyberbully, but sometimes when we're young, we're drawn into behavior that we think is funny without actually realizing some of the implications of actions. So again, that conversation, establish the facts, talk it through, remain calm, and really work through that situation step by step. Online grooming. Now, online grooming is known. Grooming as a word is used to describe people that befriend children in order to take advantage of them, usually for sexual purposes. Now, this as a topic can be particularly hard and a bit tricky to speak to our children about. But let's start with, as adults, what are some of the things that we can look out for? 40% of children remove privacy settings on social media to attract more friends or followers. It's easy to pretend that to be someone else on the internet, and children can sometimes end up having conversations with complete strangers who they don't know the real identities of. Now, online grooming can be really hard for parents to recognize because it can happen while our children are at home. And also, groomers may specifically warn children not to talk about the conversations they're having. Online groomers are not always strangers. In many situations, they might have already met them through a family, through social activities, and then they use the internet to build a bigger rapport with our children. And sometimes those children don't realize they've been groomed, and they think that that person is their boyfriend or their girlfriend. So this is going to depend on your child's age and maturity level. Inappropriate content that we've talked about includes images, information that might upset your child, and material that should be directed at adults. Inaccurate information or information that's going to lead to tempting your child into anything unlawful or dangerous. So it's important that we start to understand what we want to look out for. So is your child being secretive about who they're talking to online? Are they using sexual language that you wouldn't expect them to know and it comes out of nowhere? Or are they switching screens on their computer? You come into the room and they quickly click off whatever it is they're doing. So starting to think about how you can view this. Conversation starter. Again, if you feel uncomfortable doing this, a good way in is to talk about, oh, I heard this story, and make it relatable to the child that you have, and ask them if they know if any of their friends have experienced this. I read a story about an adult pretending to be a child online. Do you know if any of your friends have experienced something similar? And then again, you can talk about the risk, make sure that your child knows that not everyone is who they say they are online. Agree the rules. So tell your child they shouldn't share any personal information about themselves to a stranger online. They must never share pictures of their body online, and they must never meet up with someone that they've never met and they've only met them online. Stay engaged from time to time, review, look at their social media with them. You yourself or a family member, be their friend on those online platforms, and you don't need to engage as in like take part in that profile that they've got, but you can watch, you can observe from afar. I said there's loads of places for you to gain some information in this area, and it really is one of those tricky areas. So be well informed. Now, you again can come to all those individual platforms. This is an example of TikTok, where you can turn those profiles private. But there's also some organizations on the right hand side there that you can use to actually have a look at if you have any concern about your child or someone else's child. There's places you can connect. So there's a link that Benedict's going to share with you from Internet Matters, which is a blog, a parental guide around TikTok, as all our children are on TikTok. But there's also Childline. They've got a great blog. There's CEOP, which have a safety centre that's fantastic, a set of resources. And there's also the IWF, Internet Watch Foundation, where you can find a lot of information there. And I'm sure Benedict can share some of those links in the chat for you. Now, the final one to finish up today, because we are running out of time, is privacy and identity fraud. Now, just like adults, children can be at risk of having their online identity stolen and misused, and it can be difficult to maintain that child's privacy, as they may not understand really what information is safe to share or what privacy is important across the sites they're using online. So again, what do we want to look out for? You may start to suspect your child's identity has been stolen if they get a bill for something they haven't ordered, they start getting emails from an organisation that you don't recognise, or you receive any letters regarding government benefits or tax benefits. So it's great for them to build relationships and share their interests, but it's also important that we talk to our children so they start to understand what could happen if they share too much online. So some things for us to do to protect our children from identity theft: check their online privacy settings, make sure that if they're using a social networking site, everything is above board and set as privately as possible. Check their device settings, make sure that their smartphones are up to date and they've got the location services or the sharing contacts, photos, Bluetooth, really starting to just make sure that the settings are as we want them. Find out what is there already out there. So search for your child's full name on different search engines and start to have a look to see, what comes up in search when you are looking for your child's name. And don't forget to take action. Go incognito. So check websites where they appear and report and remove any inaccurate comments or photographs. And teach your child about incognito browsing if they're using a public computer at a library or at school. If your child's identity has been stolen, again, make sure you change all the passwords to anything they're using, and report to any effective websites where that problem has started. I can see there are no questions so far, so to finish up, I want to leave you with a few tips on how you can talk about online safety with your children. It's difficult, isn't it? Talking to children about some of these things, it doesn't need to be overwhelming, but we do have our responsibility as a parent to tackle this head on and build and teach that digital resilience, because it's really important as they move through life. So conversation starter tips: we want to talk early, talk often, we want to choose the right time, we want to open up and share too, and create that safe space. Now, there is a link we're going to share from Internet Matters, again, our partner today, which is a conversation starter guide PDF download. 4 simple ways that you can start to build the conversation around these 4 steps. Now, it's important that we don't bury our heads in the sand when it comes to tech. When parents say to me, I don't do social media, or I just don't get Snapchat, we need to make an effort. We want to do our research and make sure that we're not missing out on golden opportunities to keep our children safe and informed. Now, 5-point plan for parents. First of all, understand the risks, but remember they're risks, not harm. Really important. They're risks. Everything has a risk. Everything, we need to be in life risk averse and risk kind of understand that there's a risk to anything, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's harm instantly because there's a risk there. 2, keep the risks in proportion. The UK is one of the safest places for children to be online. 3, communicate regularly and consistently. Really important. Opening those conversations. 4, start to use some of these tools and settings and have that family agreement that we've talked about in some of the parts of today's session. And 5, as our children get older, we want to start to develop coping strategies that they can start to foster that resilience, speak openly, honestly, and freely to us about anything that they see online. Now, there's a mix of some of the tools that we've already talked about, but there's one more tool that I want to leave you with, and that is our Be Internet Legends. What is it? Well, it is a free, first of all, online safety program that's based on the 5 pillars: sharp, alert, secure, kind, and brave. And it gamifies, so you can play this with your child. Some of these sort of ways to stay safe online, and it's all about being internet sharp, being internet alert, being internet secure, protect your stuff, being internet kind, respect each other, being internet brave, when in doubt, discuss. And it operates through being this explorer of the digital world, and accessing these different lands where you can navigate some of the internet challenges that we may come across. So it's a great way that you can really build that open conversation and help your child be confident online explorers. So it's really nice game. If you are here today as a teacher, please do check out parentzone.org.uk, because there's some downloadables that you can use, some lesson plans, stickers, posters that really align with some of the topics that we've discussed today as well. So have a look at parentzone.org.uk for some extra resources there if you are someone that is guiding lessons. And that brings me to the end of our session. Lots of information to take up there. Now I think I've kind of covered that question that's there. I was wondering if we can warn them of what's inappropriate content depending on the age, so that they're aware. I definitely covered that during that session. So thanks for the comment. I think I hope that I've kind of covered that naturally within the content. Next steps: go out and have a look at some of those links that Benedict has shared in the chat. We'd also love it if you could, one, have a look at giving us some feedback there on that link, goo.gov/digital garage feedback. But also we're looking for all parents and carers and guides to be able to take our survey here, and it is case sensitive. So goo.gov, /B, little I, capital X, little j, 6, little y. Because we would love to hear more about your experiences with keeping your children safe online. Other than that, thank you very much for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed our session today about keeping our family safe online, and I can't wait to welcome you back to more Google Digital Garage training sessions in the future. Have a great day.